of 101 famous poems. Knee-Deep in June. By James Whitcomb Riley. Spoken and with commentary by E.T. Hansen. Tell you what I like the best, long about knee-deep in June, about the time strawberries melts on the vine some afternoon, like to just get out and rest and not work at nothing else. Orchards where I'd ruther be needn't fence it in for me, just the whole sky overhead and the whole earth underneath, so's a man can breeze like yart and kind of has elbow room to carelessly sprout out lengthways on the grass, where the shadder's thick and soft as the kivers on the bed mother fixes in the loft, allus when they's company. Just a sort of lazin' there, so lazy as you peek and peer through the wavin' leaves above, like a feller 'at's in love and don't know it, ne'er don't care. Everything you hear and see got some sort of interest. Maybe find a bluebird's nest tucked up there conveniently for the boy that's apt to be up some other apple tree. Watch the swallers scootin' past, 'bout as peart as you could ask, the bobwhite raise and whiz where some other's whistle is. Catch a shadder down below and look up to find the crow, a hawk away up there, apparently froze in the air. Hear the old hen squawk and squat over e'er chick she's got, sudden-like, and she knows where that air hawk is, well as you just bet your life she do, eyes a-glitterin' like glass, waitin' till he makes a pass. Pee-wees singin' to express my opinion 's second class, yet you'll hear 'em more or less, sapsucks gettin' down to biz, weedin' out the lonesomeness. Mr. Blue Jay, full of sass, in them baseball clothes of his, sportin' round the orchard jest like he owned the premises. Sun out in the fields can sizz, but flat on your back, I guess, in the shades where the glory is. That's just what I'd like to do, steady for a year or two. Plague if they ain't something in work 'at kinda goes agin my convictions, long about here in June especially. Under some old apple tree, just a-restin' through and through, I could get along without nothing else at all to do, only just a-wishin' you was a-gettin' there like me, and June was eternity. Lay out there and try to see just how lazy you can be. Tumble round and sauce your head in the clover bloom, or pull your straw hat across your eyes and peek through it at the skies, thinking of old chums that's dead, maybe smiling back at you in betwixt the beautiful clouds of gold and white and blue. Month a man can really love, June, you know I'm talking of. March ain't never nothing new. April's altogether too brash for me, and May, I just abominate its promises, little hints of sunshine and green round the timberland, a few promises and a few chip birds and a sprout or two drop asleep, and it turns in for daylight and snows again. But when June comes, clear my throat with wild honey, wrench my hair in the dew, and hold my coat, whoop out loud and throw my hat. June wants me and I'm to spare. Spread them shadders anywhere. I'll get down and waller there and oblige to you at that. Summer on Grandpa's farm. My grandparents had a farm in the Northwest, near Puget Sound. I grew up in Hawaii, but in the summers my parents would send me back to visit my grandparents on their farm in Bellingham, Washington, so I could see what it was like. It's funny, that part of America is known for its cold and rain and gloomy gray heavens. But in those summers, the sun was always bright and hot, like a summer should be. The farm was out in the middle of nowhere. There was a lot of nowhere, it seemed to me, in the area. You walked down a long dirt road with a ditch and fences, past endless fields of hay to the farm on the horizon. That road never seemed to end. The first thing you saw was the big red barn with its two gaping doors, one above and one below, like two mouths in a mythical eyeless face. I loved that barn. The hay, the cows, the tractor and other big machinery I did not understand, the smell of grease and manure and moist animal feed. There were other buildings, too, a chicken coop and a garage and some kinds of sheds I never figured out what they were there for. Up every wall grew brambles, tangy, dusty raspberries and thorny blackberries, and out by the swings in the playhouse for the girls was a modest orchard of plum trees, and next to that a bottomless boarded-up well that Grandma never tired of warning us kids not to get too close to. The house was old, and you smelled the age and the mustiness, and everything creaked, and Grandma was always cooking something miraculous in the kitchen and had a secret drawer full of cookies. The rooms, which were only opened up when the grandchildren came, were always musty, but I loved that mustiness. It smelled like a secret home, and the bed was a big sea of downy linen you floated on like on a sea of your dreams. From my window I could see, off in the distance, a grove of pines, alone and erect in the endless yellow fields, as if the trees, short of step and shoulder to shoulder, had shuffled over the field from some other forest somewhere, and now were just standing there, not sure what to do next. I fantasized about those trees, that there was a magic world inside, and at night little elf-like forest creatures would come out and peek in my window at me. Today that farm is just flashes of images and smells, but even those I love. I can still smell the tangy raspberries, the heavy musty quilts, the dusty hay in the fields. Now, when I feel lost or alone, when daily life is too much, that's the place I go to, and I'm always welcomed there, as I was always welcomed as a child. I pity the children of today, who live in a far too modern world, with too many machines and technology and politics and advertising blaring at them from every corner, and too few barns and chickens. But then I wonder if that's true. A kid will always find some magical place of simplicity and goodness to go to get away from the real world, and even today kids must have some grandmother or grandfather who know how to take them there. I don't know where it is, but I'm sure they will love it, just as I loved my grandfather's farm. Years later, as an adult living far from home, I returned one summer to that place. My grandparents were long gone by then, and I knew the farm was long gone too. It had been sold to a large factory that needed many miles of land around it as a buffer zone for security and safety reasons. Only the land was still there, empty now and wild with grass and bushes, growing forgotten and unmolested in the sun. I walked that road once more. Fighting with the gaps in my memory, I figured out where the house and barn must have been, and the playhouse, and the swing set. Off in the distance, the mysterious grove of trees was still there, but so much smaller than when I was a kid. The raspberry bushes and plum trees were still there, and one of the old sheds, and a few fence posts. I had expected it to sadden me. I had expected to be overwhelmed by a sense of loss, and maybe even anger at the big factory that had so selfishly bought up the land without thought of my childhood memories. But as I looked out over the wide open space, with the sun beating down and the images swimming about my head, a great gratitude descended upon me. Gratitude for the time I spent here as a child. gratitude for my grandparents who were so happy to have me, gratitude that they were able to live a long and full life on this land. For them, that farm must have held mixed feelings. Farming is hard in the best of circumstances, and farming was never their ideal life. They had wanted to live in Seattle, the big city, but when the Great Depression hit, they were forced to take over the farm, and that was it for their dreams. But they rose to the challenge and lived a good and full life there, as full a life as any of us can live. And today the fields, the woods, the raspberry brambles are drenched with the memory of them. Someday the land will be used again. The factory will go out of business and become a ruin, and the land will be resold, and farmers will move in with their families and their barns and chickens and big machines, and the land will give itself up to someone else. I hope when that happens, they have grandchildren who come to visit from afar and soak up the images and smells and gather memories that will stay with them for the rest of their lives. About James Whitcomb Riley. James Whitcomb Riley, 1849 to 1916, was known as the Hoosier poet. He began as a sign maker and wrote verses for newspapers. He rose to popularity in the 1870s by giving poetry reading tours. His sentimental, homey style, and especially the fact that he wrote almost entirely in dialect, endeared him to a broad audience. Despite brutal ongoing battles with publishers over bad contracts and a serious alcohol addiction, Riley achieved an enormous level of fame during his lifetime. For a long time, annual Riley Day celebrations were held in many states, and today there are still memorials dedicated to him. His books of poetry were often bestsellers, and his poems for children sold in the millions. His most famous poems include Little Orphan Annie and The Raggedy Man. He was known as a poet of the people, and his most important contribution may well have been to help create a literary identity for the culture of the American Midwest.